A Course in Miracles, complete and annotated edition, published in 2021 by the Circle of Atonement. Chapter 1, Principles of Miracles. You will see miracles through your hands, through me. 1. The first principle of miracles is that there is no order of difficulty among them. One is not harder or bigger than another. They are all the same. 2. Miracles in themselves do not matter. They are quite unimportant. 3. Miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. The real miracle is the love that inspires them. In this sense, everything that comes from love is a miracle. This explains their lack of order. All expressions of love are maximal. This also explains why miracles in themselves do not matter. The only thing that matters is the source, and this is far beyond human evaluation. Please read these 3 principles as often as you can today, as if there were going to be a quiz this evening. This is merely to introduce structure, if it is needed. It is not to frighten you. Do not feel guilty if you are doubting these principles. Just reread them and their truth will come to you. My strength will support you, so don't worry and leave the rest to me. All miracles mean life, and God is the giver of life. He will direct you very specifically. Plan ahead is good advice in this world, where you should and must control and direct where you have accepted responsibility. But the universal plan is in more appropriate hands. You will know all you need to know. Make no attempts to plan ahead in this respect. 4. Miracles are habits and should be involuntary. Otherwise, they may become undemocratic. Selective miracles are dangerous and may destroy the talent. 5. Miracles are natural. When they do not occur, something has gone wrong. 6. Miracles are everyone's right, but purification is necessary first. 7. Miracles are a form of healing. They supply a lack and are performed by those who have more for those who have less. 8. Miracles are a kind of exchange. Like all expressions of love, which are always miraculous in the true sense, the exchange reverses physical laws. 9. A miracle is a reversal of the physical order because it brings more love to the giver and the receiver. 10. The use of miracles as spectacles to induce belief is wrong. They are really used for and by believers. A miracle is misunderstood when it is regarded as a spectacle. Prayer is the medium of miracles. Prayer is the natural communication between the created and the Creator. Through prayer, love is received, and through miracles, love is expressed. 12. Miracles are the effects of thought. Thought can make the lower order or create the higher order. This is the basic distinction between intellectualizing and true thinking. One makes the physical, and the other creates the spiritual. And we believe in what we make or create. 13. A miracle is a beginning and an ending. It thus abolishes time. It is always an affirmation of rebirth, which seems to go back but really goes forward. It undoes the past in the present and thus releases the future. Yet there may still be one more thing: your fear of punishment for what is done now. Everybody makes mistakes. These errors are completely trivial. When the past has been forgiven, these minor infractions are very easily altered. 14. All miracles attest to truth. They are convincing because they arise from conviction. Without conviction, they deteriorate into magic, which is mindless and therefore destructive, or rather, the uncreative use of mind. 15. Each day should be devoted to miracles. Time was made so you could use it creatively and convince yourself of your own ability to create. Time is a teaching device and a means to an end. It will cease when it is no longer useful in facilitating learning. Have a good day. Since only eternity is real, why not use the illusion of time constructively? You might remember that underneath are the everlasting arms. You should begin each day with the prayer, "Help me to perform whatever miracles you want of me today." Notes on this course should be read only under good learning conditions. They should also be reviewed, with the same rule applying to review periods. I'll tell you when, but remember to ask. 16. Miracles are teaching devices for demonstrating that it is as blessed to give as to receive. They simultaneously increase the reserve of strength in the giver and supply the lack of strength in the receiver. I have forgiven you, and that means all hurt and hate you have ever expressed is cancelled. I need the children of light now, and I am calling you to be what you once were and must be again. Forget the interval of darkness and be what you were. The interval has vanished without a trace anywhere. You who live so close to God must not give way to guilt. The karmic law demands abandonment for abandoning, but you have received mercy, not justice. Help the children because you love them and love God. Remember, a miracle is a spark of life. It shines through the darkness and brings in the light. You must begin to forget and remember. 17. Miracles are the absence of the body. They are sudden shifts into invisibility, away from the physical level. That is why they heal. 18. A miracle is a service. It is the maximal service one person can render another. It is thus a way of loving your neighbour as yourself. The doer recognizes his own and his neighbour's inestimable value simultaneously. This is why you cannot keep anything you hold against another. If you do, your own value is no longer inestimable, because you are estimating it as infinity minus that amount. On sexuality. Homosexuality is lacking in love only to the extent it is based on the principle of exclusion. Everybody should love everybody. It is wrong to deny the beauty of some souls because of body structures of which you are afraid. This is essentially an unhealthy attempt to limit fear, but fear cannot be limited, just as love cannot have limits. Heterosexual attitudes can be similarly distorted, but do contain a more natural potential. Sex relations are intended for having children. You have misunderstood sex because you regard it as a way of establishing human contact for yourself. This has led to body image problems. Children are miracles in their own right. They already have the gift of life, and their parents provide them with the opportunity to express it. Nothing physical, mental, or spiritual should be used selfishly. The pleasure from using anything should come from utilizing it for God's will. You should live so that God is free to arrange temporary human constellations as He sees fit. If you have not had children, do not interpret this in terms of guilt. Many children who are already here need spiritual parents. The poor are always with us, and many who are born have not been reborn. Human birth, maturation, and development is a microcosmic representation of a much larger process of creation and development of abilities. It is subject to error as long as the real purpose of free will is misunderstood and misdirected. The real function of parents is to be wiser than their children in this respect and to teach them accordingly. 19. Miracles make minds one in Christ. They are a corporate necessity. Industry depends on cooperation, and cooperation depends on miracles. Corporate refers to the body of Christ, which is a way of referring to the church. But the church of God is merely the sum of minds He created. This is the corporate body of Christ. 20. Miracles rest on the law and order of eternity, not the arch of time. 21. A miracle reawakens the awareness that the spirit and not the body is the altar of truth. This is the recognition that leads to the healing power of the miracle. Your abilities will be very useful when they come under involuntary control rather than involuntary lack of control. Following the right involuntary guide will enable you to recognize both physical and spiritual dangers, and will provide the means for avoiding each of them in the most efficient way. This is a case in which the end does justify the means. It is only when means and ends are not of the same order of reality that there is fear. This fear arises out of the inescapable awareness which you were given by God for all time, that only the appropriate means can work for the different kinds of ends you must accomplish before you can achieve your one end. This awareness is a built-in check which was necessary if you were to use the temporary expedient of time usefully. While there is time, communion and bread are both necessary. Without either, you feel deprived, and you cannot escape this by confusing the two. All depression and all fear and embarrassment ultimately stem from this confusion. 22. Miracles are natural expressions of total forgiveness. Through miracles, you affirm your acceptance of God's forgiveness by extending it to others. The second step is inherent in the first, because light cannot tolerate darkness. Light, by definition, dispels darkness automatically. Miracles are associated with fear only because of the fallacy that darkness can hide. People believe that what they cannot see does not exist, and their physical eyes cannot see in the dark. This is a very primitive solution, and has led to a denial of the spiritual eye, which always depends on light. However, remember the biblical statement, "The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good." There are two stages, one lower and one higher, which are involved in the escape from darkness. The first is the recognition that darkness cannot hide. This usually does entail fear. The second is that there is nothing you want to hide, even if you could. This brings escape from fear. As soon as you have completely entered the second phase, you will be not only willing to enter into communion, but will also understand peace and joy. Your commitment is not yet total. That is why you still have more to learn than to teach. When your equilibrium stabilizes, you can teach as much as you learn. This will give you the proper sense of balance. Meanwhile, remember that no effort is wasted. Unless you remember this, you cannot avail yourself of my efforts, which are limitless. The biblical teaching that if you are ashamed of me before men, I will be ashamed of you before God, is interpreted as a threat only as long as you remain at the first stage. What it really means is that if you are ashamed of me, or embarrassed by love, you will project and therefore make it impossible for me to reach you. Make every effort you can not to do this. I will help you as much as you will let me. 23. Miracles make time and tide wait for all men. They can heal the sick and raise the dead, because you yourself made death and taxes and can abolish both. Note that tax also means strain. You are a miracle. God creates only that which or one who is of surpassing excellence or merit. A dictionary definition of miracles. You are capable of this kind of creation too, being in the image and likeness of your own Creator. Anything else is only your own nightmare and does not exist. Only the creations of light are real. You are wholly lovely, a perfect shaft of pure light. Before your loveliness, the stars stand transfixed and bow to the power of your will. What do children know of their creation except what their Creator tells them? You were created above the angels because your role involves creation as well as protection. You who are in the image of the Father need bow only to Him, before whom I kneel with you. 24. Miracles are part of an interlocking chain of forgiveness, which, when completed, is the atonement. This process works all the time and in all dimensions of time. I am in charge of the process of atonement, which I undertook to begin. My atonement was for the cancelling out of all sins which you could not otherwise correct. That is what the biblical statement, "Underneath are the everlasting arms," means. However, it is clear that when you can atone by miracles, both giver and receiver are atoning. It is better to atone this way because of the mutual benefits involved. Inasmuch as you do it unto the least of these, my brethren, really ends with, you do it unto yourself and me. The reason why you come before me is because I do not need miracles for my own atonement, but I stand at the end in case you fail temporarily. The word sin should really be absence of love. Sin is a man-made word with threat connotations he made up himself. No real threat is involved anywhere. Just because nature abhors a vacuum, which is true enough, it does not follow that a vacuum is filled with hellfire. Nothing is gained by frightening yourself, and it's very destructive. Miracles need freedom from fear. Part of their atonement value involves that very freedom. The word atone really means undo. If you will look up atonement, you will find that an obsolete meaning is to set at one or reconcile, to agree. Obviously, before reconciliation or agreement is possible, what is out of accord must be undone. It may seem as if darkness must be dispelled before light can come in, but the truth is that darkness is dispelled by light. The next part of the course will place increasing emphasis on atonement, since changing learning patterns requires undoing the old ones. The real meaning of retroactive inhibition is simply that when two kinds of learning coexist, they interfere with each other. Therefore, when you say, "If you want me to, I will," please add, "And if you don't want me to, I won't." This is the right use of inhibition. There has to be some control over learning for channelizing purposes. Sometimes the new learning is the more important and has to inhibit the old. It's a form of correction. Everything that results in lack of love, which you used to call sin, is the result of inferior learning, which, if overlearned, becomes very stable. Miracles are a way of undoing overlearned patterns of love lack. They bring light into darkness. That is where their atonement value lies. 25. Miracles depend on timing. This is why you shouldn't waste time. I told you before that time would cease when it was no longer useful as a learning aid. There is a way of speeding you up, and that is by leaving more and more time for me so you can devote it to miracles. The reason I direct everything that is unimportant is because it is no way to waste your free will. If you insist on doing the trivial your way, you waste too much time and will on it. Will cannot be free if it is tied up in trivia. Never gets out. It will tell you exactly what to do in connection with everything that does not matter. That is not an area where choice should be invested. There is a better use of time. You have to remember to ask me to take charge of all minutiae, and they will be taken care of so well and so quickly that you cannot get bogged down in them. The only remaining problem is that you will be unwilling to ask, because you are afraid not to be bogged down. Do not let this hold us back. If you will ask, I will arrange these things, even if you're not too enthusiastic. I am not intruding on your will, but I am trying to free it. Prayer can be very specific in little matters. If you need a coat, for example, ask me where to find one. I know your taste well, and I also know where the coat is that you would eventually buy anyway. If you do not like the coat afterwards, that is what would have happened anyway. I cannot save you more time than you will let me, but if you are willing to try the higher shopping service, which also covers all lower order necessities, and even quite a number of whims within reason, I have very good use for the time we could save. Remember, the specific answer you get depends on the specific question you ask. The fewer limits you impose, the better the answer you will get. For example, you could ask, where can I find a particular brand of coat? Or, where is the coat I want? Or, where is the coat I should get? And so on. The form of the thought determines the level of the answer. Do not get bogged down in distractions if they now arise. They are reflections of old learning patterns and arise because you do not like what I have said about leaning minutiae to me. They merely illustrate your unwillingness to not get bogged down because you are afraid of the course. So don't use them that way. This course is about willingness, not unwillingness. Unwillingness has to be replaced by willingness because willingness is part of readiness, without which learning cannot occur. 26. A miracle rearranges the order of perception and places the levels in their true perspective. This heals at all levels, because all sickness comes from confusing the levels. The reason for your difficulty with this is not that you doubt or distantiate or cannot believe. It is more of a reaction formation against a pull which you recognize is so intense that you are afraid. You think you'll be uprooted. Lord, heal me is the only legitimate prayer. This also means, Lord, atone for me, because the only thing you should pray for is forgiveness. You have everything else. Now take this personally and listen to divine logic. If, when you have been forgiven, you have everything else, and you have been forgiven, then you have everything else. This happens to be the simplest of all propositions. If P then Q, P, therefore Q. Your real question is P true? If you will review the evidence, I think you will find this inescapable. I went on a very personal record to this effect, and I am the only completely true witness for God. You have every right to examine my credentials. In fact, I urge you to do so. It may have been years since you have read the Bible. The purpose of the atonement is to restore everything to you, that is, to restore your awareness of everything. You had everything when you were created, just as everyone did. Having been restored to this original state, you naturally become part of the atonement yourself. You now share my inability to tolerate lack of love in yourself and in everyone else, and must join the great crusade to correct it. The slogan for this crusade is listen, learn, and do. This means listen to my voice, learn to undo the error, and do something to correct it. The first two are not enough. The real members of my party are active workers. The power to work miracles belongs to you. I will arrange the right opportunities for you to do them, but you must be ready and willing to do them, since you are already able to. Doing them will bring conviction in the ability. I repeat, you will see miracles through your hands, through mine. Conviction really comes through accomplishment. Remember that ability is the potential, achievement is its expression, and atonement is the purpose. 27. A miracle is a universal blessing from God, through me to all my brothers. It is the privilege of the forgiven to forgive. Souls cannot rest until everyone has found salvation. The disciples were officially and specifically told to heal others, as physicians of the Lord. They were also told to heal themselves, and they were promised that I would never leave them or forsake them. Atonement is the natural profession of the children of God, because they have professed to me. The children need both strength and help. You cannot help until you are strong. The everlasting arms are your strength, and the wisdom of God is your help. Heaven and earth shall pass away means that they will not always exist as separate states. My word, which is the resurrection and the life, shall not pass away, because life is eternal. You are the work of God, and his work is wholly lovable and wholly loving. This is how you must think of yourself in your heart, because this is what you are. 28. Miracles are a means of organizing different levels of awareness. Miracles come from the below conscious or subconscious level. Revelations come from the above conscious or superconscious level. The conscious level is in between and reacts to either subconscious or superconscious impulses in varying ratios. Freud was right about this basic classification, but wrong about the names. He was also right that the content of consciousness is fleeting. Consciousness is the level which engages in the world and is capable of responding both to external and internal impulses. Having no impulses from itself and being primarily a mechanism for inducing response, it can be very wrong. For example, if the identification is with the body, consciousness may distort superconscious impulses by denying their source and seeking their impact in the orgasm. This is the result of mistaken identity. If you will look at the effects of revelation, you will see that there are some similarities in the experiential results, but hardly in the content. Revelations induce complete but temporary suspension of doubt and fear. They represent the original form of communication between God and his sons before the intrusion of fire and ice made this impossible. It should be noted that they involve an extremely personal sense of closeness to creation, which human beings try to find in sexual relationships. This confusion is responsible for the depression and fear which are often associated with sex. Sex frequently involves lack of love, but revelation is purely a love experience. Physical closeness cannot achieve this. As was said before, the subconscious impulses properly induce miracles, which are interpersonal and result in closeness to others. This can be misunderstood by a personally willful consciousness as an impulse toward sexual gratification. Revelation unites you directly with God. Miracles unite you directly with others. Neither emanates from consciousness, but both are experienced there. This is essential because consciousness is the state which produces action, though it does not inspire it. You are free to believe what you choose. What you do attests to what you believe. The deeper levels of your subconscious always contain the impulse to miracles, but you are free to feel its superficial levels, which are closer to consciousness, with the impulses of this world, and to identify yourself with them. This results in denying yourself access to the miracle level underneath. In conscious actions, then, your interpersonal relationships also become superficial, and miracle-inspired relating becomes impossible. 29. Miracles are a way of earning release from fear. Revelation induces a state in which fear has already been abolished. Miracles are thus a means, and revelations are an end. In this sense, they work together. Miracles do not depend on revelation. They induce it. You are quite capable of miracles already, even if you may still be too fearful for revelations. Revelation will occur after you engage at the visionary level in a process of denying fear. Revelation is intensely personal and is actually not translatable into conscious content at all. That is why any attempt to describe it in words is usually incomprehensible, even to the writer himself at another time. This is why the book of Revelation is essentially incomprehensible. Revelation induces only experience, Miracles, on the other hand, induce interpersonal action. In the end, these are more useful because of their impersonal nature. In this phase of learning, working miracles is more valuable because freedom from fear cannot be thrust upon you. The experience cannot last. Miracles, therefore, are the essential course of action for everyone. Miracles praise God through you. They praise God by honouring His creations, affirming their perfection. They heal because they deny body identification and affirm spirit identification. By perceiving the spirit, they adjust the levels and see them in proper alignment. This places the spirit at the centre, where minds can communicate directly. 31. Miracles should inspire gratitude, not awe. Human beings should thank God for what they really are. The children of God are very holy. The miracle honours their holiness. God's creations cannot lose their holiness, though it can be hidden. The miracle uncovers it and brings it into the light where it belongs. Holiness can never be really hidden in darkness, but a person can deceive himself on this point. This illusion makes him fearful because in his heart he knows it is an illusion. As with all illusions, he exerts enormous efforts to establish its validity. The miracle sets validity where it belongs. Eternal validity belongs only to the Spirit. The miracle acknowledges only the truth. It thus dispels a person's illusions about himself and puts him into communion with himself and with God. 32. Christ inspires all miracles, which are essentially intercessions. They intercede for a person's holiness and make him holy. They place him beyond the physical laws and raise him into the sphere of celestial order. In this order, he is perfect. The spirit never loses its communion with God. Only the mind needs atonement. The miracle joins in the atonement of Christ by placing the mind in the service of the Spirit. This establishes the proper function of mind and abolishes its errors. 33. Miracles honour a person because he is lovable. They dispel his illusions about himself and perceive the light in him. They thus atone for his errors by freeing him from his nightmares about himself. They release him from a prison in which he has imprisoned himself. By freeing his mind from illusions, they restore him to his right mind and place him at the feet of Jesus. The mind can be possessed by illusions, but the spirit is eternally free. If a mind expresses without love, it can make an empty shell. This can be possessed by evil thoughts. But atonement restores the mind to its proper place. Unless there is emptiness, there is no danger, and emptiness is a false creation. The mind that serves the spirit is invulnerable. 34. The miracle restores the mind to the fullness of spirit. By atoning for lack, it establishes perfect protection. The strength of the Spirit leaves no room for intrusions. The forgiven are filled with the Spirit, and their spirit forgives in return. It is the duty of the released to release their brothers. The forgiven are the means of atonement. Those released by Christ must join him in releasing their brothers, for this is the plan of atonement. 35. Miracles are the way in which minds that serve the Spirit unite with Christ for the salvation or release of all God's creations. There are certain advantages in being a psychologist. A major one is the understanding of projection and the extent of its results. Possession is very closely related to projection. Lucifer could literally be translated light bearer. He literally projected himself from heaven. Projection still has this hurling connotation because it involves hurling something you do not want and regard as dangerous and frightening to someone else. This is the opposite of the golden rule, and having placed this rule upside down, the reverse of miracles, or projection, follows automatically. The correction lies in accepting what is true in yourself by bringing all that you are into light. One of the major problems with miracle workers is that they are so sure that what they are doing is right because they know it stems from love, that they frequently do not pause to let me establish my limits. While what they do comes from me, they often cannot be induced to ask me each time whether I want them to perform this particular miracle. If they did, they would not perform any miracles that could not get through constructively and would thus save themselves unnecessary strain. Instead, some burn themselves out with indiscriminate miracles and to this extent do not fulfill their own full purpose. The answer is to never perform a miracle without asking me if you should. This spares you from exhaustion. But just because miracles are expressions of love, it does not follow that they will always be effective. I am the only one who can perform miracles indiscriminately because I am the atonement. You have a role in the atonement, which I will dictate to you. Remember, you already have a principle about the involuntary nature of miracles. We have also established the fact that everything involuntary belongs under Christ's control, not yours. Under Christ's control, miracles replenish the doer as well as the receiver. Miracle workers must learn Christ's control to replace their former habits which did produce scarcity in place of abundance. From errors of this kind, the sense of deprivation is inevitable, but very easily corrected. Possession really means not under Christ's control, thus making the mind vulnerable to projection. The idea of earthbound entities entering into bodies really refers to being taken over by your own earthbound thoughts. This is demon possession. After all, Lucifer fell, but he was still an angel. He is thus the symbol for humanity. Atonement is the knowledge that the belief that angels can fall is false. It is true that mind can make projections as well as miracles, but it is not true that projections are real. Any psychologist should understand this, that this is what is meant by the truth shall set you free. You need to understand the very important difference between Christ control and Christ guidance. Christ-controlled miracles are part of the atonement, but Christ guidance is personal and leads to personal salvation. The impersonal nature of miracles is an essential ingredient because this enables me to control their distribution as I see fit. Christ guidance, on the other hand, leads to the highly personal experience of revelation. This is why it involves personal choice. A guide does not control by definition, but he does direct, leaving the following up to you. Lead us not into temptation means guide us out of our own errors. Note that the word is lead, not order. Take up thy cross and follow me should be interpreted to mean recognize your errors and choose to abandon them by following my guidance. When you are afraid of possession, you need only remember that error cannot really threaten truth, which always can withstand its assaults. Only the error is really vulnerable. The princes of this world are princes only because they are really angels. But they are free to establish their kingdom where they see fit. If you will remember that all princes inherit their power from the Father, the right choice becomes inevitable. Spirit is in the state of grace forever. Your reality is only your spirit. Therefore, you are in the state of grace forever. Atonement undoes all errors in this respect, and thus uproots the real source of fear. If you will check back at the reference to uprooting, you will understand it better in this context. Whenever God's reassurances are experienced as threat, it is always because you are defending your misplaced and misdirected love and loyalty. That is what projection always involves. Casting spells merely means affirming error, and error is lack of love. When a person projects this lovelessness onto others, he does imprison them, but only to the extent that he reinforces errors they have already made. These distortions make them vulnerable to the curse of others, since they have already cursed themselves. The miracle worker can only bless them, and this undoes the curse and frees the soul from prison. 36. Miracles are examples of right thinking. Through miracles, reality contact at all levels becomes strong and accurate, thus permitting correct delineation of intrapersonal and interpersonal boundaries. As a result, the doer does see the truth as God created it. This is what is meant by the principle on perspective adjustment. 37. A miracle is a correction factor introduced into false thinking by me. It acts as a catalyst, shaking up erroneous perception and snapping it into place. This correction factor places you under the atonement principle, where your perception is healed. Until this has occurred, perception of the divine order is impossible. True depth perception becomes possible only at the highest order of perceptual integration. 38. The spiritual eye is the mechanism of miracles, because what the spiritual eye perceives is true. The spiritual eye perceives both the creations of God and the products of human beings. Among the latter, it can also separate the true from the false by its ability to perceive totally rather than selectively. It thus becomes the proper instrument for reality testing, which always involves the necessary distinction between the true and the false. 39. The miracle dissolves error because the spiritual eye identifies error as false or unreal. This is the same as saying that by seeing light, darkness automatically disappears. Darkness is lack of light. It does not have unique properties of its own. It is an example of the scarcity fallacy, from which only error can proceed. Truth is always abundant. Scarcity leads to overeating and other false drives. Abundance eliminates these. Those who perceive and acknowledge that they have everything have no need for driven behavior of any kind. 40. Miracles are a blessing from parents to children. This is just another way of phrasing the earlier principle about by those who have more for those who have less. Children do not belong to parents, but they do need to share their parents' greater abundance. If they are deprived, their perception becomes distorted. When this occurs, the whole family of God, or the sonship, is impaired in its relationships. Ultimately, every member of the family of God must return. The miracle calls to him to return, because it blesses and honors him even though he may be absent in spirit. 41. The miracle acknowledges all men as your brothers and mine. It is a way of perceiving the universal mark of God in them. This is the true strawberry mark of brotherhood. Your false idea about your own exclusion from universal love is both fallacious and arrogant. Your real specialness does not stem from exclusion, but from inclusion. All my brothers are special. You should stop interpreting this as all except me. This is ridiculous. The implied lack of love that this version contains is way off the mark and misses the level of right thinking entirely. You must heal your perception in this respect. You must work a miracle on behalf of yourself here. See the principle about miracles as perception correctors, before you can extend miracles as creative energizers, which they are. 50 million Frenchmen can be wrong because the notion is too fragmented. What can't be wrong is the universal sonship of which you are a part. God is not mocked, may arouse anticipation of punishment, but it is really a reassurance. God would be mocked if any of his creations lacked holiness. The creation is whole. The mark of wholeness is holiness, not holes. The sonship has no holes anywhere. Remember, God is not mocked under any circumstances. 42. Wholeness is the perception content of the miracle. It thus corrects or atones for the faulty perception of lack. We can now return to the fundamental distinction between miracles and projection. The stimulus must precede the response and must also determine, or at least influence, the kind of response that is evoked. The relationship of stimulus and response is extremely intimate. The behavioristic terminology is because this part deals with behavior. Behavior is response, so the question, response to what, becomes crucial. Stimuli of all kinds are identified through perception. You perceive the stimulus and behave accordingly. It follows, then, that as ye perceive, so will ye behave. Consider the golden rule again. You are asked to behave toward others as you would have them behave toward you. This means that your perception of both must be accurate, since the golden rule is the order for appropriate behavior. You can't behave appropriately unless you perceive accurately, because appropriate behavior depends on lack of level confusion. The presence of level confusion always results in variable reality testing, and hence in variability in behavioral appropriateness. All forms of debasing your self-image are fundamental perceptual distortions. They inevitably produce either self-contempt or projection onto others, and usually both. Since you and your neighbour are equal members of the same family, as you perceive both, so will you behave toward both. The way to perceive for golden rule behaviour is to look out from the perception of your own holiness and perceive the holiness of others. Note the very old Jewish practice of changing the name of a person who is very ill, so that when the list is given to the angel of death, the person with that name will not be found. This was actually a distortion of a revelation about how to alter or avert death. The revelation's proper content was that those who change their mind, not name, about destruction or hate do not need to die. Death is a human affirmation of a belief in hate. That is why the Bible says there is no death, and that is why I demonstrated that death does not exist. Remember that I came to fulfill the law by reinterpreting it. The law itself, if properly understood, offers only projection. It is those who have not yet changed their minds who have entered the hellfire concept into it. Remember, I said before that just because nature abhors a vacuum, it does not follow that the vacuum is filled with hellfire. The emptiness engendered by fear should be replaced by love, because love and its absence are in the same dimension, and true correction cannot be undertaken except within a dimension. Otherwise, there has been a confusion of levels. You need considerable clarification of the channel role. If you ask somebody what he believes before you tell him what you believe, then you are implying that you will say what he approves. This is not the real authority. The right way to complete the sentence, "When they told me what to do," is, I referred the question to the only real authority. The Bible says, "To everyone then who gives witness to me before men, I will give witness before my Father in heaven." The quotation means that you represent or witness for the authority in whom you believe. Your witnessing demonstrates your belief and thus strengthens it. I assure you that I will witness for anyone who lets me, and to whatever extent he himself permits it. Those who witness for me are expressing, through their miracles, that they have abandoned deprivation in favor of the abundance they have learned belongs to them. 43. A major contribution of miracles is their strength in releasing a person from his misplaced sense of isolation, deprivation, and lack. They are affirmations of sonship, which is a state of completion and abundance. The emphasis on changing your mind needs further clarification. Whatever is true and real is eternal and cannot change or be changed. The spirit is therefore unalterable because it is already perfect. But the mind can elect the level it chooses to serve. The only limit which is put on its choice is that it cannot serve two masters. While the ballot itself is a secret one and the right to vote is fully protected, voting always entails both election and rejection. If two candidates are voted for the same position, the machine cancels the ballot automatically. This is necessary because a split vote does not represent any real allegiance. Free will is the attribute of the mind, not the spirit. The spirit always remains changeless because it never leaves the sight of God. The creation of the spirit is already fully accomplished. The mind, if it votes to do so, becomes a medium by which the spirit can create along the lines of its own creation. If it does not freely elect to do so, it retains this creative ability, but places itself under tyrannous rather than authoritative control. As a result, what it makes is imprisonment, because such are the dictates of tyrants. To change your mind means to place it at the disposal of true authority. The miracle is thus a sign that the mind has elected to be guided by Christ in his service. The abundance of Christ is the natural result of choosing to follow him. The following is in relation to the question of sex. You are involved with unconscious distortions which are producing a dense cover over miracle impulses, making it hard for them to reach consciousness. Sex and miracles are both ways of relating. The nature of any interpersonal relationship is limited or defined by what you want it to do, which is why you want it in the first place. Relating is a way of achieving an outcome. Indiscriminate sexual impulses result in body image misperceptions. This is an expression of an indiscriminate attempt to reach communion through the body. This involves not only improper self-identification, but also disrespect for the individuality of others. Self-control is not the whole answer to this problem, though I am by no means discouraging its use. It must be understood, however, that the underlying mechanism must be uprooted, a word you should understand well enough by now not to regard it as frightening. All shallow roots have to be uprooted because they are not deep enough to sustain you. The illusion that shallow roots can be deepened and thus made to hold is one of the corollaries on which the reversal of the golden rule, referred to twice before, is balanced. As these false underpinnings are uprooted or given up, equilibrium is experienced as unstable. But the fact is that nothing is less stable than an orientation which is upside down. Anything that holds it that way is hardly conducive to greater stability. The whole danger of defences lies in their propensity to hold misperceptions rigidly in place. This is why rigidity is regarded as stability by those who are off the mark. A rigid orientation can be extremely reliable, even if it is upside down. In fact, the more consistently upside down it is, the more reliable it is. One of the more horrible examples of inverted or upside down thinking, and history is full of horrible examples of this, was the Nazis' final solution. I shed many tears over this, but it is by no means the only time I said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." All actions which stem from reversed thinking are literally the behavioural expressions of those who know not what they do. Actually, Jean Dixon was right in her emphasis on feet on the ground and fingertips in heaven. Although she was too literal for some, many people knew exactly what she meant, so her statement was the right miracle for them. I submit that if a mind is in valid relationship with God, it can't be upside down. Many have lost sight of the end and are concentrating on the means. Remember the story about the artist who kept devoting himself to inventing better and better ways of sharpening pencils. He never created anything, but he had the sharpest pencil in town. The sexual language here is intentional. Sex is often utilized on behalf of very similar errors. Hostility, triumph, vengeance, self-debasement, and all sorts of expressions of the lack of love are often very clearly seen in the accompanying fantasies. But it is a profound error to imagine that because these fantasies are so frequent or occur so reliably, this implies validity. You can be wholly reliable and entirely wrong. Intellect may be a displacement upward, but sex can be a displacement outward. How can you come close to others through the parts of you which are really invisible? The word invisible means cannot be seen or perceived. What cannot be perceived is hardly the right means for improving perception. The confusion of miracle impulse with sexual impulse is a major source of perceptual distortion because it induces, rather than straightens out, the basic level confusion which underlies all those who seek happiness with the instruments of the world. A desert is a desert is a desert. You can do anything you want in it, but you cannot change it from what it is. It still lacks water, which is why it is a desert. The thing to do with a desert is to leave. 44. Miracles arise from a miraculous state of mind. This state of mind goes out to anyone even within the awareness of the miracle worker himself. The impersonal nature of miracles is because the atonement itself is one. By being one, it unites all creations with their creator. 45. The miracle is an expression of an inner awareness of Christ and acceptance of his atonement. The mind is, then, in a state of grace and naturally becomes gracious both to the host within and the stranger without. By bringing in the stranger, he becomes your brother. The miracle of healing is to bring those who are estranged from each other together because they are estranged from God. The miracles you are told not to perform have not lost their value. They are still expressions of your own state of grace. But the action aspect of the miracle should be Christ-controlled because of his complete awareness of the whole plan. The impersonal nature of miracle-mindedness ensures your own grace, but only Christ is in a position to know where grace can be bestowed. 46. A miracle is never lost. It touches many people you may not even know, and sometimes produces undreamed of changes in forces of which you are not even aware. This is not your concern. The miracle will always bless you. This is not your concern either. But it is the concern of the record, which always measures what it was supposed to measure. I want to finish the instructions about sex because this is an area which the miracle worker must understand. Inappropriate sex drives or misdirected miracle impulses result in guilt if expressed and depression if denied. We said before that all real pleasure comes from doing God's will. Whenever it is not done, an experience of lack results. This is because not doing the will of God is a lack of self. Sex was intended as an instrument for physical creation, see previous notes, to enable souls to embark on new chapters in their experience and thus improve their records. The pencil was not an end in itself, see earlier section. It was an aid to the artist in his own creative endeavours. As he made new homes for souls and guided them through the periods of their own developmental readiness, he learned the role of the Father himself. The whole process was set up as a learning experience in gaining grace. The pleasure which is derived from sex as such is reliable only because it stems from an error which people shared. Awareness of the error produces guilt. Denial of the error results in projection. Correction of the error brings release. The only valid use of sex is procreation. It is not truly pleasurable in itself. Lead us not into temptation means do not let us deceive ourselves into believing that we can relate in peace to God or our brothers with anything external. The sin of Onan was called a sin because it involved a related type of self-delusion, namely that pleasure without relating can exist. The concept of either the self or another as a sex object epitomizes this strange reversal. It is objectionable, but only because it is invalid. Upside-down logic produces this kind of thinking. Child of God, you were created to create the good, the beautiful, and the holy. Do not lose sight of this. Invite me to enter anywhere temptation arises. I will change the situation from one of inappropriate sexual attraction to one of impersonal miracle working. This is the real meaning of changing the channel for libidinal expression. The love of God, for a little while, must still be expressed through one body to another. That is because the real vision is still so dim. Everyone can use his body best by enlarging the perception of others, so they can see the real vision. This vision is invisible to the physical eye. The ultimate purpose of the body is to render itself unnecessary. Learning to do this is the only real reason for its existence. We said before that prayer is the medium of miracles. The miracle prayer is, if you will tell me what to do, I will to do it. This prayer is the door that leads out of the desert forever. This, however, is not a complete statement because it does not exclude the negative. We have already told you to add the thought, and not to do those you would not have me do, in connection with miracles. The distinction has also been made here between miracle-mindedness as a state and miracle-doing as its expression. The former needs your careful protection because it is a state of miracle readiness. This is what the Bible means in the references to hold yourself ready and other similar injunctions. Readiness here means keeping your perception right side up, so you will always be ready, willing, and able. These are the essentials for listen, learn, and do. You must be ready to listen, willing to learn, and able to do. Only the last is involuntary, because it is the application of miracles which must be Christ-controlled. But the other two, which are the voluntary aspects of miracle-mindedness, are up to you. To channelize does have a narrowing down connotation, though not in the sense of lack. The underlying state of mind or grace is a total commitment. Only the doing aspect involves channelizing. This is because doing is always specific. A channel must learn to do only what it is supposed to do. The prayer should therefore read, if you will tell me what to do, only that I will to do. Revelation is literally unspeakable because it is an experience of unspeakable love. The word "or" should be reserved only for revelation, to which it is perfectly and correctly applicable. It is not appropriately applied to miracles because a state of true awe is worshipful. It implies that one of a lesser order stands before the greater one. This is the case only when a son of God stands before his Creator. The sons are perfect creations and should be struck with awe in the presence of the Creator of perfection. The miracle, on the other hand, is a sign of love among equals. The equal cannot be in awe of each other because awe always implies inequality. Awe is not properly experienced even in relation to me. I kneel beside you, facing the light. An elder brother is entitled to respect for his greater experience and obedience for his greater wisdom. He is also entitled to love because he is a brother, and also to devotion if he is devoted. It is only my own devotion that entitles me to yours. I have knelt at your altar as readily as I would ever have you kneel at mine. There is nothing about me that you cannot attain. I have nothing that does not come from God. The main difference between us, as yet, is that I have nothing else. That leaves me in a state of true holiness, which is only a potential in you. No man cometh unto the Father but by me, is among the most misunderstood statements in the Bible. It does not mean that I am in any way separate or different from you, except in time. Now, we know that time does not exist. Actually, the statement is much more meaningful if it is considered on a vertical rather than a horizontal axis. Regarded along the vertical, humanity stands below me and I stand below God. In the process of rising up, I am higher. This is because without me, the distance between God and humanity is too great for you to encompass. I bridge the distance as an elder brother on the one hand and a son of God on the other. My devotion to my brothers has placed me in charge of the sonship, which I can render complete only to the extent I can share it. This appears to contradict another statement. I and my Father are one. It doesn't. There are still separate parts in this statement in recognition of the fact that the Father is greater. Actually, the original statement was, are of one kind. The Father and the Son are not identical, but you can say, like Father, like Son. The Holy Spirit is the bringer of revelations. Revelations are indirectly inspired by me, because I am close to the Holy Spirit and alert to revelation readiness in my brothers. I can thus bring down to them more than they can draw down to themselves. Jean Dixon's description is perhaps a better statement of my position, because my feet are on the ground and my hands are in heaven. I can bring down the glories of heaven to my brothers on earth. The Holy Spirit is the highest communication medium. Miracles do not involve this type of communication because they are temporary communicative devices. When the sonship can return to its original form of communication with God by direct revelation, the need for miracles is over. The Holy Spirit mediates higher to lower order communication, keeping the direct channel from God to humanity open for revelation. Revelation is not reciprocal. It is always from God to you. This is because God and you are not equal. The miracle, on the other hand, is reciprocal because it always involves equality. 47. The miracle is a learning device which lessens the need for time. In the longitudinal or horizontal plane, the true equality of all the members of the sonship appears to involve almost endless time. But we know that time is only an artifact introduced as a learning aid. The sudden shift from horizontal to vertical perception, which the miracle entails, introduces an interval from which the doer and the receiver both emerge much farther along in time than they would otherwise have been. A miracle has thus the unique property of abolishing time by rendering the space of time it occupies unnecessary. There is no relation between the time a miracle takes and the time it covers. It substitutes for learning that might have taken thousands of years. It does this by the underlying recognition of perfect equality and holiness between doer and receiver on which the miracle rests. The miracle is unstable but perfectly consistent. That is, it does not occur predictably across time, and it rarely recurs in comparable forms, but within itself it is perfectly consistent. Since it contains nothing but an acknowledgement of equality and worth, all parts are equal. We said before that the miracle abolishes time. It does this by a process of collapsing it. It thus abolishes certain intervals within it. It does this, however, within the larger temporal sequence. The validity of the miracle, then, is predictive, not logical, within the temporal schema. It establishes an out-of-pattern time interval, which is not under the usual laws of time. Only in this sense is it timeless. By collapsing time, it literally saves time, much the way daylight saving time does. It rearranges the distribution of light. 48. The miracle is the only device which you have at your immediate disposal for controlling time. Only revelation transcends it, having nothing to do with time at all. The miracle is much like the body, in that both are learning aids which aim at facilitating a state in which they are unnecessary. When you are finally in the original state of direct communication, neither the body nor the miracle serves any purpose. While you are in the body, however, you can choose between loveless or miraculous channels of creativity. You can make an empty shell, see previous reference, but you do not make nothing at all. You can wait, delay, paralyze yourself, reduce your creativity almost to nothing, and even induce a real developmental arrest or regression. But you cannot abolish your creativity. You can destroy your medium of communication, but not your potential. You were not created by your own free will. Only what you make is yours to decide. The basic decision of the miracle-minded is not to wait on time any longer than is necessary. Time can waste as well as be wasted. The miracle worker therefore accepts the time control factor of the miracle gladly, because he knows that every collapse of time brings everyone closer to the ultimate release from time, in which the Son and the Father are one, or of one kind. The real meaning of one kind is of one mind or will. When the will of the Sonship and the Father are one, their perfect accord is heaven. Equality does not imply homogeneity now. When everyone has everything, individual contributions to the Sonship will no longer be necessary. When the atonement has been completed, all talents will be shared by all of the sons of God. God is not partial. All of his children have his total love, and all of his gifts are given freely to everyone alike. Except you become as little children means unless you fully recognize your complete dependence on God, you cannot know the real power of the Son in his true relationship with the Father. You do have special talents, which are needed for the celestial speed-up at this time. But note that the term speed-up is not one which relates to the transcending of time. When time is abolished and all the sons of God have come home, no special agents will be necessary. But do not underestimate the power of special agents now, or the great need there is for them. I do not claim to be more than that myself. No one in his right mind, a term which should be specially noted, ever wants either more or less than that. Those who are called on to witness for me now are witnessing for all men as I am. Fantasies are distorted forms of thinking because they always involve twisting perception into unreality. Fantasy is a debased form of vision. Visions and revelations are closely related. Fantasies and projection are more closely associated because both attempt to control external reality according to false internal needs. Live and let live happens to be a very meaningful injunction. Twist reality in any way and you are perceiving destructively. Reality was lost through usurpation, which in turn produced tyranny. Now you must choose freely to devote your heritage to the greater restoration. As long as a single slave remains to walk the earth, your release is not complete. Complete restoration of the sonship is the only true goal of the miracle-minded. Sexual fantasies are distortions of perception by definition. They are a means of making false associations and obtaining pleasure from them. You can do this only because you are creative. But although you can perceive false associations, you can never make them real except to yourself. As we said before, you believe in what you make or create. If you make a miracle, you will be equally strong in your belief in that. The strength of your conviction will then sustain the belief of the miracle receiver. No fantasies, sexual or otherwise, are true. Fantasies become totally unnecessary as the wholly satisfying nature of reality becomes apparent. The sex impulse is a miracle impulse when it is in proper focus. One individual sees in another the right partner for propagating the species and also for their joint establishment of a creative home. This does not involve fantasy at all. If I am asked to participate in the decision will be a right one too. The choice of sex partners often involves a lack of love, and this, whatever happens, must be atoned for. They are frequently selected precisely because they are not suited to gratify your fantasies. This is not because you want to abandon or give up the fantasies, but because you are afraid of them. You see in a partner a means of protecting against the fear, but you then continue to look around for chances to indulge the fantasies. The dream of the perfect partner is an attempt to find external integration while retaining conflicting needs in the self. Some abandon the hope in a neurotic sense of despair of finding that perfect partner. Others insist the hope is justified. None is in his right mind. The lack of love or faulty need orientation, which leads to a particular person, not object, choice can often be corrected within the existing framework. The situation is questionable largely because of its inherent vulnerability to fantasy gratification. Doing the best you can within this limitation is often the best correction measure. Any relationship you have undertaken for whatever reasons becomes a responsibility. If you shift your own needs, some amount of corresponding shift in the need orientation of the other person must result. This will be beneficial, even if the partner was originally attracted to you because of your disrespect. Teaching devices which are totally alien to a learner's perceptual system are usually merely disruptive. Transfer depends on some common elements in the new situation, which are understandable in terms of the old. How can sexual impulses be directly translated into miracle impulses? In a situation where you or another person, or both, experience inappropriate sexual impulses. 1. Know first that this is an expression of fear. Your love toward each other is not perfect, and this is why the fear arose. 2. Turn immediately to me by denying the power of the fear and ask me to help you replace it with love. This shifts the sexual impulse immediately to the miracle impulse, and it places it at my disposal. 3. Then acknowledge the true creative worth of both yourself and the other one. This places strength where it belongs. Note that sexual fantasies are always destructive or depleting, in that they perceive another in an inappropriate creative role. Both people are perceived essentially as objects, fulfilling their own pleasure drives. This dehumanized view is the source of the depleting use of sex. Freud's description is purely negative, that is, sex as a release from the unpleasant. He also observed that the tension from id impulses never completely abates. What he should have said was that the shift from miracle impulses to sexual impulses was debilitating in the first place because of the level confusion involved. This set up a state in which real release was impossible. Note also that Freud's notion of sex was as a device for inducing relaxation, which he confused with peace. Inappropriate sex relaxes only in the sense that it may induce physical sleep. The miracle, on the other hand, is an energizer. It always strengthens and never depletes. It does induce peace, and by establishing tranquility, not relaxation, it enables both giver and receiver to enter into a state of grace. Here, their miracle-mindedness, not released from tension, is restored. Tension is the result of a building up of unexpressed miracle impulses. This can be truly abated only by releasing the miracle drive, which has been blocked. Converting it to sexual libido merely produces further blocking. Never foster this illusion in yourself or encourage it in others. An object is incapable of release because it is a concept which is devoid of creative power. The recognition of the real creative power in yourself and others brings release because it brings peace. The peace of God, which passeth understanding, can keep your hearts now and forever. Remember that you who want peace can find it only by complete forgiveness. You never really wanted peace before, so there was no point in knowing how to get it. This is an example of the need-to-know principle, which was established by the Plan of Atonement long before the CIA. No kind of knowledge is acquired by anyone unless he wants it or believes in some way he needs it. The following section will be the only one which deals with the concept of lack, because while the concept does not exist in what God creates, it is very apparent in what you make. It is, in fact, the essential difference. A need implies lack by definition. It involves the recognition, conscious or unconscious, and at times, fortunately, superconscious, that you would be better off in a state which is somehow different from the one you are in. Until the separation, which is a better term than the fall, nothing was lacking. This meant that you had no needs at all. If you had not deprived yourself, you would never have experienced them. After the separation, needs became the most powerful source of motivation for human action. All behavior is essentially motivated by needs, but behavior itself is not a divine attribute. The body is the mechanism for behavior. Nobody would bother even to get up and go from one place to another if he did not think he would somehow be better off. Believing that you could be better off is the reason why you have the mechanism for behavior at your disposal. That is why the Bible says, "By their deeds ye shall know them." You act according to the particular hierarchy of needs you establish for yourself. Your hierarchy, in turn, depends on your perception of what you are, that is, what you lack. This establishes your own rules for what you need to know. Separation from God is the only lack you really need to correct. But your separation would never have occurred if you had not distorted your perception of truth and thus perceived yourself as lacking. The concept of any sort of need hierarchy arose because, having made this fundamental error, you had already fragmented yourself into levels with different needs. As you integrate, you become one, and your one need becomes one accordingly. Only the fragmented can be confused about this. Internal integration within the self will not suffice to correct the lack fallacy, but it will correct the need fallacy. Unified need produces unified action because it produces lack of ambivalence. The concept of need hierarchy, a corollary of the original error, requires correction in its own level before the error of levels itself can be corrected. You cannot operate or behave effectively while you operate at split levels. But as long as you do so, you must introduce correction from the bottom up. This is because you now operate in space, where up and down are meaningful terms. Ultimately, of course, space is as meaningless as time. The concept is really one of space-time belief. The physical world exists only because you can use it to correct your unbelief, which placed you in it originally. As long as you knew you did not need anything, the whole device was unnecessary. You can never control the effects of fear yourself, because you have made fear and believe in what you make. In attitude, then, not in content, you resemble your own Creator, who has perfect faith in his creations because he created them. All creation rests on belief, and the belief in the creation produces its existence. This is why it is possible for you to believe what is not true for anyone else. It is true for you because it is made by you. Every aspect of fear proceeds from upside-down perception. The truly creative devote their efforts to correcting this. The neurotic devotes his to compromise. The psychotic tries to escape by establishing the truth of his own errors. It is most difficult to free him by ordinary means, only because he is more stable in his denial of truth. 49. The miracle makes no distinction among degrees of misperception. It is a device for perception correction, which is effective quite apart from either the degree or the direction of the error. This is its true indiscriminateness. Christ-controlled miracles are selective only in that they are directed toward those who can use them for themselves. Since this makes it inevitable that they will extend them to others, a very strong chain of atonement is welded. But Christ control takes no account at all of the magnitude of the miracle itself, because the concept of size exists only in a plane that is itself unreal. Since the miracle aims at restoring reality, it would hardly be useful if it were bound by the laws of the same error it aimed to correct. Only human beings make that kind of error. It is an expression of the foolish consistency their own false beliefs have engendered. Both the power and the strength of your creative will must be understood before the real meaning of denial can be appreciated and abolished. Denial is not mere negation. It is a positive miscreation. While the miscreation is necessarily believed in by its own maker, it does not exist at all at the level of true creation. 50. The miracle compares what you make with the higher level of creation, accepting what is in accord as true and rejecting the discordant as false. All aspects of fear are untrue because they do not exist at the higher creative level and therefore do not exist at all. To whatever extent you are willing to submit your beliefs to the real test of validity, to that extent are your perceptions healed or corrected. In sorting out the false from the true, the miracle proceeds along these lines. Perfect love casts out fear. If fear exists, then there is not perfect love. But only perfect love really exists. Therefore, if there is fear, it produces a state which does not exist. Believe this and you will be free. Only God can establish this solution, for this faith is his gift. But you must contribute to your readiness here as elsewhere. The readiness for faith, as for everything else that is true, entails the two steps necessary for the release from fear. Denial of fear in human terms is a strong defense because it entails two levels of error. One, that what is true can be denied, and two, that absence of truth can be effective. Experiencing fear, which is more characteristic of some people, involves only the second error. However, such differences do not affect the power of the miracle at all, since only the distinction between truth and error is its concern. Some are both more miracle-minded and less able to recognize fear because of their stronger but split identification. Others are less miracle-minded but better able to recognize fear because their identification is more consistently right but weaker. Together, the conditions needed for consistent miracle-mindedness, the state in which fear has been abolished, can be particularly well worked out. The purpose of this course is integration. You cannot use it right until you have taken it. As long as your identification either vacillates or is weak, you cannot accept the gift that belongs to you. You are still either vacillating between recognizing the gift and throwing it away, or regarding yourself as too weak to accept it. You do not yet know its healing power. After you have taken the course, you will accept it and keep it and use it. That is the final exam, which you will have no trouble in passing. Mid-term marks are not entered in the permanent record.